Good afternoon, everybody. So let's make a start. My name's Emily Pearson, and I'm the founder and managing director at Our Minds Work. And I'm hosting the session today, and very luckily being joined by Mark Cooper from the IPS service at Cumbria, Northumberland, Tyne and Weir NHS Foundation. So Mark will tell you all about himself and the team and what they do. And the reason why we decided to join forces today was we have a little bit of a synchronicity going on between what we do in our services. So Our Minds Work literally exists to create mentally healthy workplaces that thrive. And that means supporting people who have mental health problems, mental ill health, stress, lots of different variations and symptoms of severity of poor mental health. And what Mark and his team do is they support people who have mental health problems and lived experience into the workplace. So we want to create a workplace where the culture is actually supportive of those people. And when we started talking about both of our services and the aims and objectives of what we do, we realized that actually there was a little bit of a gap in how those services can actually work together to make sure that when it comes to recruitment and retention of people who have mental health problems and lived experience, that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that that's a culture that is supportive of those people. So we're really excited to share a lot of insight with you today from the services, and hopefully hear some insights from yourselves as well. So let's get moving. So just a little bit about who we are. So as I mentioned, Our Minds Work literally exists to create mentally healthy workplace cultures. We are a team of specialists in the workplace mental health field, but we all come from a background of health and social care. And what we have done is we've designed our own framework of best practice and culture and behaviour and prevention change models to align an organisational culture on all levels to become mentally healthy. So we do that through targeted training, development, qualifications, workshops, resources, whatever an organisation needs to help them to achieve this. And it is targeted on all levels. From CEO, we have level 4 and level 5 diplomas in workplace mental health, all the way down to frontline staff, education, building skills and helping people to change the behaviours and making it accessible to everybody. So I'll introduce you to Mark, and Mark's going to tell you a little bit about the IPS service.
Thank you, Emily, and good afternoon to everybody. I can see some of my learned colleagues, some friendly faces out there in cyber world, so welcome. So yes, IPS, another acronym, another NHS acronym, you say. Individual placement support. I'll talk about this perhaps at length, not too lengthy, you'll be pleased to know. But we, as Emily has said, we are a team that is relatively new within our service delivery area, which is obviously the Cumbria, Northumberland, Tyne and Weir sort of geography. And we look to support people into work. We also look to support people who are in work and who are currently engaging with our clinical services. This isn't something that our patients can go to from the doctor, you know, the GP surgery. They are generally in secondary healthcare. So at this point in their recovery journey, you know, they have been in our system of recovery for quite a while. Ultimately, we look to people like your good self who we're talking to today to harness those relationships, to harbour good working practices, and to also, you know, the bottom line is give people a chance. Just because somebody is not very well at a particular moment in their life doesn't mean that their functionality, their ability to perform at a good level is hindered. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but thank you very much, Emily.
Sorry, I had muted myself there. There we go. So we just want to start off with just a little bit of background about why we are here. I think it's probably starting to make sense of why we've joined forces between the two organisations and services here. So we're just going to talk through a little bit more around understanding the challenges and the barriers to people who have mental health problems of actually getting into work, but also staying there and being retained in an organisation. There is usually a lot of misunderstanding around people who are currently accessing benefits, who have poor mental health or have mental health problems. People tend to think that people on benefits with mental health problems don't want to work, when it's actually the opposite. Around 70 to 90% of people who have mental health problems want to work. And, you know, if you think about the good things we get from good work, you know, nobody wants to get into a crap job that actually causes more poor mental health. So people are generally wanting to get into good work. You know, good work brings a lot of positive aspects for recovery in our mental health as well. So we have this huge cohort of people who are skilled, who are talented in their own rights, have qualifications, have a lot to give. However, only 7% are actually in paid employment. That's a massive disparity between those two statistics there. Some of these barriers include stigma and discrimination from the workplace, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth about that. Mark's going to actually tell you a story of one of their clients who has given permission to share their story around some of the barriers and challenges that they faced while looking for work and being supported by the IPS service. There's a legal obligation for employers to support people with mental health disabilities. But when you work in this area, you very, very quickly realise that this isn't always what happens. Not always does the culture support people with disabilities in itself, never mind just mental health disabilities. But when it comes to supporting people with mental health disabilities, we are a couple of decades behind the movement and the successes that physical disabilities have actually seen over the past 20 years. So we still have a lot of way to go to make sure that people with mental health disabilities have the right levels of support in place for them. And obviously embedding a culture that supports inclusivity and diversity is very, very important. And we hear a lot about, you know, the latest diversity and inclusion strategies, policies, procedures, culture that we want to embed there. And people with mental health disabilities need to be a part of that. And sometimes we see a bit of a disparity between diversity and inclusion and how mental health disabilities actually fits into that strategy as well. Have you got anything you want to add to that, Mark?
No, I think, you know, these conversations can go on and on and on, because ultimately they're the type of things that happen around us all day. I think the bottom line is with this is what Emily opened with. There's only 7%. 7%. It's nothing. You know, it's absolutely nothing in terms of, you know, a viable, functional, highly performed, skilled workforce, and it sits there, and nobody seems to want to engage with it as a workforce. And conversely, on the other aspect, the workforce itself feels that it can't engage with employers, and that is the bottom line. I think that's fair to say, Emily.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Mark. So what you'll have seen also as you've joined is there was a little bit of a poll up on the screen for you. So I'm going to go through just some of the answers just to hear a little bit about what you have got to say about where you think the gaps are that support people with mental health disabilities. So this is completely anonymous, so nobody can see what you've selected. If you do have anything that you want to say, please feel free to chat privately to us if you want to keep it anonymous as well. And I can answer any questions in the chat box or mention any comments that you want to add to this. So the biggest gap we have with 11 out of 14, so that's 79%, saying that it's the lack of manager skills, confidence and behaviours in supporting people with mental health problems and mental health disabilities. One of our flagship qualifications is actually for managers on creating mentally healthy workplaces and supporting people with mental health disabilities. And I absolutely agree that there are a lot of organisations out there where there's still a lack of skills, confidence and behaviours. And what we've actually seen over the past couple of years has been a lot of awareness raising, lots of mental health first aid style awareness around mental ill health. But actually when it comes to managers' skills and confidence and their behaviours, it needs to go beyond awareness. You know, this needs to be more around providing the managers with the capabilities to actually confidently support people while they're at work and through the recruitment process as well. So the second one we have, down here, 50% have said that the workplace creates stress and poor mental health. Obviously, if you already have an underlying mental health problem or condition, you may be in recovery, and unfortunately, high levels of stress can re-trigger relapses for people with mental health problems and conditions. So this is really, really problematic in the workplace, that people need to be kept mentally well while they're at work, and it is actually a legal obligation. The HSE clearly have a legal obligation through employers to prevent work-related stress. So we see that there is a lot of there's a lot of ignorance around the HSE legislation. A lot of organisations don't know about it. They've never heard about it. And the HSE have just released the other day that during their spot checks for COVID that they're going to be doing on employers, they're actually going to start asking questions about stress risk assessments and what organisations do to prevent work-related stress, because it's a massive problem and it is currently the highest reason for sickness absence from the workplace due to work-related stress, anxiety and depression. So we see that is a problem as well. Completely understand how that's been reported as a big gap there. So the next one is 44% in the recruitment process. So we are going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that process. So it's interesting to see that one. And then we have mental health isn't mentioned until someone becomes unwell. So this is a lack of open communication around it. This can also create that elephant in the room. No one's talking about it, which is perceived as stigma. So that could be that there's a lot of stigma in the workplace that then stops any early intervention and prevention and becomes very, very reactive to somebody. What else do we have on there? 13% company brand not seen as disability confident. So the brand, the reputation of the organisation, you know, has a huge impact on that recruitment process. Who wants to work for a company that isn't supportive of its employees' health and well-being? So really interesting to see that. Thank you so much for everybody who participated. Any surprises in there for you, Mark?
Yeah, I think that some of those figures are quite alarming in as much as, you know, who would have thought, particularly around recruitment, you know, I mean, that's quite a substantial percentage, and I think this is the time, you know, to take note, and I'm pleased that organisations such as our various learned government departments are starting to understand that, yes, there is a human story, but there is also a massive financial, and the implications to business are huge if we don't start to get a little bit more savvy with this.
Yeah, definitely. The return on investment is quite significant. I know poor mental health in the workplace currently costing the UK economy over £45 billion every year. It's nothing to be sniffed at, is it? That's for certain. But like you say, there's a human story at the centre of all of that. And we're going to hear a human story now. So Paul is going to share, Mark is going to share Paul's story of one of their clients who have been working with the service, to give you a little bit of insight into some of the barriers and challenges that somebody with a mental health condition can face during the recruitment and retention process. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Emily. I think just before I start this isn't made up. This is a human being. This is a living, breathing human being. So just please bear that in mind. This isn't just academic. This is a human being. So as a little bit of a very brief backstory, I met Paul professionally, a man of a similar age to myself, who had a very, very full and fulfilling career. His background was in marketing, advertising, things of that nature. And it's fair to say that Paul's functionality, that sounds very clinical. This guy could rock and roll. There's no two ways about it. Absolutely. His insight into business was absolutely fantastic. And I know, just having met him on several occasions, that he worked for some big organizations throughout his working life. And then all of a sudden, snap of a finger, mental health came to visit, shall we say, in not the best way for him. And then, as he said to me, you know, I was literally cast to the scrap heap. Never any sort of pastoral conversations, just literally, when you're coming back. And if you do come back, what are you going to be able to do? Now, you know, the audience here, myself, some of my colleagues who are sat out there today, understand there is a business need, quite blatantly. You know, that's why people go to business, because there is a bottom line, there is a profit margin, etc., etc. But as I said to you, ladies and gentlemen, right from the get-go, this is a human being. This isn't a spreadsheet. This is a person who lives and breathes. So with all that in mind, I just want to read you a bit of a story that Paul helped me with whilst we were doing a presentation to the Chamber of Commerce. So excuse me if I look away for a little moment, but I'm going to read what he wrote to me. So there are people like me everywhere, sitting at home worrying, or even at work worrying. Mental health is an important consideration in the workplace. We all know that happy people are productive people. This isn't just some Californian hippie vibe. Yes, we can make the world a better place, but it will also have a positive impact on all or any business. We can do both. And ultimately, as he said to the chamber, you can do both. So he goes on to say, the recent COVID crisis has made us all reevaluate who and what is important. Many that were considered to be menial roles have rightly been elevated to near hero status. All workers are important, and their thoughts and their feelings are important too. It has taken a global pandemic to remind us of this. A year ago, we would not have thought that someone stacking the shelves in our local supermarket was at the front line and did something that was so fundamentally and nationally important. Now we know different. We can build a brave new world, this time with a foundation of common sense and kindness. Paul then goes on to talk about his interaction with the individual placement support service, so IPS. So he says that IPS has made me realize that not only have I something to offer, it has made me want to offer it. There is a wealth of talent, experience, and expertise out there just waiting to be tapped. And I don't just mean me. I might still have a head full of anxieties. I still question my worth and my value. But IPS doesn't. They accept, they encourage, they enthuse, and they lead. And I now am beginning to feel useful again. Not least being here, nothing can fuel your anxiety like sitting in front of a room full of strangers. But I was asked what I thought of the IPS team, and this is a testament to the positive impact it is having on my life. And I am here today and telling you about it, or in this case, me in kind. I am not selling little green dragons anymore. These aren't just pipe dreams. These are real people and real lives, and you can make a real difference. This won't work without your help, your embrace, and your far-sighted realization that to get to the best out of your workforce, you have to give them the best too. You are already at the forefront of this because you are here and you are engaged and you are listening. I personally want to thank you on behalf of everybody who is a little bit lost. The people like me, who need your help. All the people who have so much to offer and all the people who have so much to give. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a real person who needs help of people like yourselves.
Thanks, Mark. And I think from me, when I listen to that story, it is just one person, and the amount of how many more of those people are in the UK right now who are lost, who are struggling with their mental health, and who unfortunately aren't getting the right levels of support that they need from their employer. 56% of sickness absence was due to work-related stress, anxiety, and depression between 2019 and 2020. So this was pre-COVID. So not only are people not receiving the support that they need, but for many, workplaces have become the cause of mental ill health as well, which is really quite frightening. So we definitely have to do something more about that. And, brilliant that Paul is saying thank you for being here today and it being on your radar and actually wanting to learn and understand more about what are the barriers in recruitment and retention for people who have poor mental health conditions and problems, which is what we're going to cover next. So I like to open up the floor a little bit as well to anybody who wants to engage with a bit of a conversation. Has anyone had any personal experiences of situations like Paul's where you feel free or happy to share that today, or a story that you can tell without identifying anyone? Can we make it real about more people like Paul? No? Well, I have one, so I'll share one with you. I do the work that I do for the past 22 years. I hate to say that, makes us feel so old, because of my own lived experience of mental ill health. And I've experienced relapses on and off since my early teens. So for a long time, I've experienced poor mental health whilst being in work and in jobs. And I remember one of the worst episodes that I had in my early 20s. I ended up having to leave work with no other job to go to because the workplace was very toxic. At the time, I was working in a prison environment with young people. So you can imagine that stress of that type of work in the first place, but the culture of the environment was very, very toxic on top of that. And I had to leave work without another workplace to go to because it was absolutely impossible to receive any care or attention from that employer because you were unable to talk about it. So completely understand the experiences that people go through. And this is one of the reasons why we put so much into supporting employers to create cultures that actually foster good mental health, that are open, that are not stigmatizing, that are not discriminating of people. Because as Mark said, going through a bad time in your life where you're experiencing mental ill health does not mean that it should be a label that sticks and that you are just no good and you need to be thrown on the scrap heap. We can still be very, very successful at what we do, even with ongoing mental health problems. So for me, this is a pretty kind of personal one to be covering. So we're going to talk a little bit now about just some of the barriers that are specifically in recruitment and retention. And we're going to start off just looking at a couple from the recruitment process. Now, we saw a selection of people had said, actually, we think one of the barriers is in the recruitment process and the brand reputation and the messages that are attracting talent. Can I just ask, feel free to put it in a chat box if you like. I'll have a look in the chat box as well and make sure that I'm answering any questions in there. When it comes to brand reputation and messages attracting talent, if you were somebody like Paul, what is it do you think that you would want to see from an employer while you were looking for work? What is it that you think that if you have a mental health problem, diagnosed condition, but are well enough to get back into work, what is it that you would want to see from an employer that would make you want to oh, that looks like a great place to work. Feel free to pop it in the chat box. Feel free to unmute yourself and tell us what you think. You know, what is it do you think that people are actually looking for when we're looking at this potential barrier? What is the barrier? What is the gap there?
I think just diving in a little bit there, Emily, just to add a bit of weight to this. I think one of the big issues I guess we as human beings have is that we talk about work-life balance all the time. We really do. It's a thing, you know. It's part of my working life. We're looking for the best deal all the time because we've got commitments in our social life, we've got commitments in our professional life. But yet, when we get to this slight little blip in that continuum, it all goes out of the window. There is no work-life balance. All of a sudden, work-life balance is, oh, no, you can't do any of this. And I think we need to remember that, you know, out there. And I have to remind myself about this. Just because something pops its head up at a particular time, work-life balance, the need to be able to balance the books still exists.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody's looking for a great deal as well, aren't there? And it's really interesting that some of the comments in here, you know, Stuart says safety, trust, listen to, demonstration of care. And how does an organization demonstrate that? So if you're thinking about someone outside of the business, very easy to know what's going on inside the business, but what messages can we show to say that we are an organization that promotes psychological safety, that builds trust, that will listen to you? And diversity and inclusion from Kate there, you know, it's great to have a diversity and inclusion policy, but actually the culture comes from the behaviors. The policy isn't a behavior, it's just a statement or a set of statements. So how do you actually evidence those for the messages that you're giving out there? Danny, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, apologies for the voice, Emily. I've got this virus going round.
Oh, no.
So I work in Mark's team, and for me, we often have discussions with people looking for work about self-disclosure, about what they're comfortable in disclosing to the potential employer. And for me, if I was looking for work, I'd be looking to see the reputation around what support they give their employees, that work-life balance. Are their advertisers disability confident? Do they support mental health charities? You know, I would delve into that company and do some research and some feedback and possibly speak to people who've worked there, because it's, as Mark says, you know, a company might advertise 37.5 hours. Once they start, the more they seem to be more inclined to get as many hours out of that person as possible without thinking of that work-life balance. And although I love my job, I go to work to live, not the other way around. So that's just for me anyway.
Thanks, Danny. Really insightful. Some really great tips on what companies could be promoting. Kind of fits in with what Jane's just put in the chat box there. So actually promoting the information around the flexibility, mental health awareness, so what training and additional supports provided for people. And that's a great one, a testimonial. Your biggest cheerleader or not are your ex-employees. You know, those testimonials from not just your employees, but any partners and other organizations that you work with, a really, really important part of how we actually show that what we are saying and our messages are actually part of our culture, which are our behaviors. It's the way we communicate with each other. So it sounds like you've got some great tips there.
I think, sorry, Emily, sorry, just Deb, I'm just reading yours there about the inclusivity of the employer. And, you know, we all read job specs, we all look at, you know, what the job narrative is. But like I say, we're human beings, and wouldn't it be nice to just read something that had a little bit of validity and context to our pastoral needs? It would be so refreshing, wouldn't it? And for me, with my recruitment head on, it would be an absolute go-to every time. And from a recruitment point of view, the more people interested in my business, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. even on your application, your job advert, we can add special messages on there that says we are organisations that want to have anybody join us from any kind of background, any type of walk of life, and making sure that those messages are seen all the way through, where you're marketing and promoting the business to attract that talent. And that's a great one, Danny. Low turnover of staff would indicate a great employer. There are lots of websites these days where actually your employees can, you know, give you however many stars they think that you deserve. It's become much easier for brand reputation to be built around those testimonials as well. So there's some really great examples there. So then the next one is the fear of stigma and discrimination. So you're seeing all these amazing messages, but how do you know that they're real? Yeah, how do you know that they're being lived? How is that psychological safety and trust being evidenced? Because remember, trust doesn't just come from these messages. Trust is generally built up over time. Now, if you're going through the recruitment process and somebody does have lived experience or a diagnosed mental health problem, you know, where is the conversation that opens up a situation or an opportunity for somebody to disclose that? What we generally see, and Mark will probably agree with us here, is that it doesn't get disclosed. Mental ill health doesn't get disclosed at this stage, and it isn't until the person's in the job and then a couple of months down the line, and then maybe problems start to arise because of lack of support and reasonable adjustments for that person, and then people are looking at it as a performance issue rather than there's been a problem that we haven't picked up and haven't supported that person from the get-go. So how do we create a situation during that recruitment process where we can actually remove that fear of stigma and discrimination? Feel free to pop in the chat box any examples that you have. One of the application process is obviously a really interesting place to ask questions like that. A lot of applications processes will ask, do you have a disability that we need to provide reasonable adjustments for if you are successful in attending the next stage of the application process? How often do people understand that their mental health problem is classed as a disability? How comfortable are people to tick that box and say, I have an anxiety disorder, I have bipolar disorder, and this is the support that I might need? I think this one's sometimes quite a tricky one, isn't it? Because the fear of, if I tick this box, am I going to be discriminated against? And there is currently quite a bit of research out there that has evidenced that people who are part of this HR and recruitment process, unfortunately, do have biases against people with mental health disabilities and would actually ask for additional information if somebody said, I have a mental health problem. So a couple of things in the chat box there. Question from HR perspective, example, asking that type of question and application. We start the conversation once appointed. Okay. Do you have that question on your application process about any disability so that you can offer reasonable adjustments?
We do at the point of interview, but it's not,
yes,
it's more, are there any kind of reason, is there any adjustments that we need to make
to
help you with the interview process? But it's not specific, because you don't want to muddy the water, so that if you actually end up not taking that person on for reasons, you know, outside of any potential discrimination, you don't want that to be suggested as being the reason. So I think it's valid, and you need to make the adjustments, and we share as much as we can about all the things that we have in place. But we wouldn't really ask that question until they've actually been appointed, and at the point of appointment then we find out more about them, because at that point you've already accepted that they're joining you on their merits or whatever. And at that point, you can then look to make the adjustments for them to be able to start to work and let them know what kind of things you have in place. But I would not be comfortable asking on a piece of paper that kind of question. And I think as an employee, if you ask that, I mean, I would imagine that that's quite off-putting to the person. They probably are unlikely to want to disclose right at the start.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, Mark, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was going to say, Jane, I think, refreshing to hear, obviously, some of the guys who are on this with me today, we see this a lot, and there is a huge sort of void or spectrum of questioning on application forms. And, personal, professional advice to any clients is you are interviewed and you will get the job on the merits of the spec. Nothing else. So in terms of disclosure, there's you don't need to talk about the fact you've got a false leg, rapid cycling bipolar. It's kind of immaterial. So thank you for sharing that, because it's good to know that does exist out there and people are accepted on the merits of meeting the job spec.
Yeah, definitely. Danny's got his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say very much what Mark said. I've had a few clients who have purposely not ticked the disability box because it said if you have a disability and meet the job spec, you'll be guaranteed interview. So I've had some who've turned around and they've made their own decision not to tick that box so they get the job on the merits, as opposed to getting the interview because I've got a disability. And I can see both sides of the argument for that one, but I've had it a few times with clients.
So it's they're looking for hitting a quarter of that. Again, that diversity and inclusion part of this. A lot of organisations will say, well, we purposely recruit whatever percentage of people with disabilities, and that can be seen through that process and how that can actually impact the person at the center of that. Yeah, definitely. So then moving on to then psychologically unsafe to disclose during the recruitment process. So that's this is the next stage, isn't it, from that fear of discrimination and stigma, so that people won't actually or will choose not to disclose. What about, how do we support people who actually feel comfortable with that disclosure and want to disclose during the recruitment process? Any examples of what you do in your organisation to make sure that that person is kept safe and supported if they do decide to disclose during the recruitment process? I've got a little bit of a tool that I'm going to share with you that can actually be used if somebody wants to disclose, so that you can actually collaborate together on what support that person may need, and it can be used quite early on if that person is willing and wants to disclose quite early on as well. Do you come across anything like that, Mark, within your clients? Do you have any clients that particularly want to disclose quite early on, and how do you support that journey for them?
So from a sort of perspective of IPS and my colleagues and I, we encourage people to be very open and honest, right from the get-go, because there is obviously an essence of you have a function, you are skilled, and your mental health, because you're engaging with our clinical services, is kind of irrelevant at this moment in time. The point is that you are good enough to meet that spec, you're good enough to move forward. But ultimately, why do you need to not talk about it? Because there's nothing to not talk about. And I think, advice certainly is that, potentially if there is something that we need to navigate going forward, because it's has a medical connotation or a clinical connotation, then it makes best sense to talk about it at the earliest opportunity, providing both, you feel comfortable in that in that conversation. So it's always about honesty. It's always about being open, but it's also about, you know, this is something just as it would be if I had to go and, I don't know, have a bandage changed or go to the dentist. It is part of your working and life balance.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? And I think it's very individual to the person, and I think that level of confidence of being able to also put yourself into that position, also at risk of it being psychologically unsafe to disclose, and you are then potentially going to be discriminated against because you have gone ahead and done that. So really, for me, that would be my fear, is if I disclose it, I would want to feel confident to say, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I experience, this is what you can expect. I don't know when it's going to happen again, but if it does, this is the support that I'm going to need, and be confident enough to do that. That psychologically safe place to be able to do that isn't always what we expect it to be. So I think from an employer's perspective, how do you create that? Yeah.
And I think from an employer's point of view, again, going back a couple of stages, what Jane said before, that's why it is so key to get it right, because ultimately, you know, there is no problem. You know, it is like going to have a toothache. It to you is a massive indictment of how he feels and the trust that he has in you as an organization. So that's how I would leave that, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Mark.
Absolutely.
Hello, you've got your hand up there. Sorry, I don't know what your name is.
I'm Louise. Hi.
Oh, Louise.
I'm also on Mark's team, so hi. I think the way that the recruitment process is conducted as well could be addressed. So the wording on application forms, if it could just be changed to say, we encourage you know, disclosure, it's a safe environment. If you want to word it in a slightly different way to encourage those conversations to take place, that would be good. But I've found myself just supporting people to apply for roles, even just getting job alerts. You know, I recently created a job alert on a charity website, and it was quite invasive. They wanted so much information, including my national insurance number.
Right.
No, and that was just to get the job alert. And I thought, no, I don't want to disclose that. I don't see why it's important at this stage to give out that kind of information. And I think the recruitment process itself, especially when it's an online application, can be quite, you know, not very user friendly, put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes organizations could think about making the front page, if you like, the web page on their application process, just worded in a more user friendly way, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant tip there, and it kind of links into, you know, one of the barriers is that it's just not talked about at all, that it's not mentioned, and that silence can just be as powerful as actually having too much information and overwhelming people with what you want from that application process. So there's kind of two sides to it there, isn't it? And I like the way that you have used actually that you can word it to say, we do encourage people to talk about their mental health at work, and if you do feel like you want to, we will support you with X, Y, and Z, and really spell it out for people to help to create that safe place for them to do that. So we can see there's quite a few barriers there, and they actually fall into the barriers in retention as well. So if we start finding solutions to these, no matter whether it's in the recruitment process, the retention process, it will actually solve the problems across the whole two sections there. One of the biggest barriers in retention, unfortunately, is the workplace triggering relapses for poor mental health. It can be really, really stressful for people who already have underlying mental health problems, who are in recovery, to be in work where it's the work that's actually causing a relapse of their mental health. And from our own experience, the majority of employers that we come across are not appropriately or even legally tackling work-related stress. So these psychological hazards and psychological injuries are actually putting people at risk of relapse, which for me is a real big problem. You know, when it comes to physical health and safety, we do so much more around that to make sure that people are kept safe and healthy. When it comes to the psychological hazards, there's definitely nowhere near enough being done to protect people who don't have mental health problems, but it's even more problematic for people who do have underlying mental health problems. Have you seen this as an issue with any of your clients, Mark?
Yeah, I think it's, there's a gentleman that's just flashed into my, and, you know, work is as quite blatantly, or, you know, why would we have employment support in secondary mental health? Well, it's a bloody good help when it comes to the road to recovery. It's absolutely fantastic. However, it's not risk averse, it's calculated risk, and there are triggers and there are ups and downs, and the very thing that makes that person get up in the morning, if I think about this chap in my head now, is the very thing that can make him so unwell. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's taken a long time, if I think about him, to have a conversation with the employer to basically keep the same level of function and productivity, but it's just, we've changed the landscape a bit. We've just taken the work dynamic and made it safe. And that's great, but yes, it crops up all the time, Emily.
Yeah, definitely. I know it is a legal requirement from the Health and Safety Executive for employers to prevent work-related stress by doing stress risk assessments, and those stress risk assessments of how you as an employer are going to prevent psychological injuries to the staff should be shared with them. So that could be another idea during your recruitment processes, to actually promote how you try to mitigate as much risk as possible for psychological injuries by following HSE legislation and putting those risk assessments in place, and actually saying these are the things that we do to prevent work-related stress. So that's, you know, a massive barrier, but there is so much more in that area that organisations can do. That's for certain. Danny, IPS clients are encouraged to be supported in a wellness action plan. Yep, that's a brilliant idea. And we've got a little bit of an example of a tool for people to take away shortly on that. So that's a great tool we'll give people to take away today. A lack of support and reasonable adjustments. So once people are in the job, the conversation still hasn't happened. Great to hear that you're having that conversation really early on, Jane, and then looking at what support can be put in place straight away. But unfortunately, due to a lack of manager capabilities and skills, they don't know how to have these conversations, they don't know how to do regular check-ins, they don't understand what reasonable adjustments are, what a stress risk assessment is. So a lot of that actually, once they are in the organisation, a lot of the retention comes down to the manager and the culture of the organisation and the culture of that team. And again, the stigma and discrimination, again, can be really led by a manager within their team. And the way that we think about culture is your organisation generally tends to have a wider culture that they're trying to set. You know, leaders will spend a lot of time writing their leadership behaviours and the culture that they want to create. Unfortunately, if you have an organisation that has many leaders in it, and we class managers as leaders of their teams, they will all create their own subcultures within those organizations. So actually, you might be saying our brand, our reputation, you know, we have D&I and mental health support, but actually once that person's in the organization and they're in their team with a manager, a lot of that retention will rely on the manager's capabilities and the culture within that team, not even the wider organization. So this becomes a huge area that work and investment and development needs to be put into those managers to be able to effectively support people who do come into the workplace with mental health problems to start off with. Anything that you want to add on the retention element, Mark?
I think it's everything that you've said is very pertinent and poignant. I think one thing that is worth just thinking about. So obviously what I do and my colleagues do is obviously in one vein, but the NHS, bless its cotton socks, is still a business, and it still has to run, and it still has to perform and do its services. So when I look at how our managers look at us, we have different types of supervision. We have pastoral supervision, pastoral stuff, wellness supervision, how are you coping type supervisions, and then we have business type supervisions with caseload management and, you know, effective outcomes and things of that nature. And it's worth having a look at that. When I look at my supervisor and the amount of hours that she will put in, it's not a massive amount more work. And it's certainly our team, it keeps us in a good and happy place because she talks to us about how we're feeling. So it's worth noting that it's not just, as my learned friend Paul says, some hippie vibe. It actually works. It's good.
Yeah, definitely. So we've covered quite a few barriers there, and they tend to be across the whole spectrum, across the whole cycle of the employee, from all the way from recruitment all the way through to retention and even exiting the business as well. So we've come up with 8 steps to creating a mental health culture that attracts and retains talent. So I'm just going to summarize some of the things that we've talked about, and then I'm also going to share with you the Stay Well at Work support plan. There is the Wellness Action Plan, which is the Mind's version of a workplace wellness action plan. Obviously, I'm going to say ours is better. I'm allowed to say that. But, you know, there are 2 available. You will receive this one, and you can download the Mind one from the Mind website. So feel free to check them both out. But just to kind of summarize some of the tips that we've gone over today, having managers and leaders suitably trained with the capabilities and confidence to have these conversations around mental health, to support individuals who are living with mental health problems, and to prevent work-related stress are really an essential part of your workplace culture. The stigma, discrimination, a lot of it actually falls on that manager and leadership capabilities. So it's a really, really important part. And that actually in our poll was the biggest gap that you all said that you had when it came to recruitment and retaining people with mental health problems. So the second one there is to embed a Stay Well at Work support plan for individuals to take ownership of and collaborate with managers on supportive measures and reasonable adjustments. This Stay Well at Work support plan should be introduced as early as possible within that recruitment process, so that you're actually saying, look, if you do want to disclose, there's a document here where you can detail what it is that you experience and how we can help you. This is about collaborative care, creating a psychologically safe workplace and working together on a document that actually says, what is it that you need from us to support you? And, you know, how else can we help? What other support can we make sure that is in place for you? And it's a really great document, which I am going to share with you in a moment. Obviously, when it comes to mental ill health, and if this isn't just people with mental health problems and disabilities, this could be anybody in your workplace at any point in time. When we start opening the door to talking about mental health in the workplace and tackling stigma and discrimination, we're opening the door for people to come and talk to you about everything from work-related stress, domestic violence, suicide. Yeah, this isn't just talking about stress, anxiety, and depression. It's about opening a discussion where people are not only going to tell you their experiences, but what's caused those mental health experiences as well. So we have to be really prepared for that as an organisation, and making sure that we have sufficient safeguarding and crisis management policies and procedures that are really truly embedded into the organisation, so that everybody knows and understands how we keep colleagues safe if they do disclose they're at risk of significant harm to themselves or others. If we go, come and talk to me about your mental health, and we don't have this covered, you're creating a really safe environment, not just for the person disclosing, but for the person that's being disclosed to, because you're leaving them there with an inability to deal with that situation and know how to keep that person safe. So a lot of you may or may not have an EAP in occupational health. It's really, really important that we provide quick support for people who are experiencing poor mental health. Again, if we go, come and talk to us when you're feeling unwell. Oh, okay, so you've got anxiety. Oh, can you just pop and see your doctor, because we've got no other support to provide you right now. So actually having an employee assistance program in occupational health there means that you have very, very quick access that can be used as early intervention and even preventatively for people to gain access to support, information, tools and guidance, without saying, oh, well, we've got nothing we can do to help you other than go to the doctor. So it's, again, creating a safety net, and it's a great way of promoting how else you support your employees inside the business. Regular campaigns that provide awareness and signposting to support and making them accessible for all is a great way of building brand, building trust, and creating a psychologically safe place as well. When we regularly share these campaigns and awareness and make sure that there's support there, it has to be accessible for everyone. And we hear this a lot in organisations, a lot around, you know, the corporate departments, the office-based people, really accessible, really involved, really engaged in this type of kind of well-being strategy. But when it comes to kind of blue collar workers, it doesn't reach them, or it's not set out for them. Great example is the logistics industry. The logistics industry are not talking about employee mental health. I think they're still in the 70s. But when it comes to drivers' well-being, it's actually created a massive problem that they're struggling to attract and retain talent. You know, and it's not just about the money and putting the money up, it's also about how we treat our employees, how we provide the support, how we create a healthy workplace. Now, when your employees live in a tin can 5 days a week out on the road, how do you make sure that all of this is accessible to them? Yeah, your night shift workers, trades, the people who are dispersed all over, how do we make sure that all of this stuff is accessible and communicated across the whole of the organisation? How do we embed the conversations, tools and support offered through the recruitment and onboarding process? It's a really important part that you think about. How is this a constant message throughout the whole life cycle of the employee, through the way we conversate with people, through the way we behave with each other, the tools and support that's provided, and making sure that it is accessible throughout that whole process. Promoting a mentally healthy culture that aims to attract talent from all walks of life across your brand, website and recruitment process. And we talked about how we could actually do that. It's really important that we are able to make sure that this is the culture that we live and breathe. These are our values, these are our beliefs, these are the things that we are going to do, and that we have the integrity to do them, that will actually say, that looks like a great place to work, I want to go and work there. Yeah. And obviously evaluate, monitor and review all of these things, make sure they're working. Having focus groups with people who have mental health problems, other forms of disabilities. This is across any kind of diversity and inclusion. When we're not doing things to people, and that's why it needs to be evaluated, monitored and reviewed. When we are making these changes and implementing these things, that we're not doing them to people, that actually the people are involved in this. Is it work, and what changes do we need to make? Reviewing it and actually making it work for the people who need it, rather than this is just something we're going to do to people because we want to be seen as a great place to work who has mental health on our agenda. Anything you want to add to that, Mark?
No, I think that's pretty extensive. I would just say, again, there should never be the dollar sign or the pound sign attached to this. But from a business point of view, I did some work with an internationally known car hire company some time ago. And when you start looking at how mental health, in terms of absence, in terms of people not being able to perform to the business need, the implications of that on that pound sign is absolutely huge. So definitely from a human perspective, please adopt these bullet points, but certainly to support the business, it makes common sense to be an inclusive employer. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I just want to share with you now a tool that I will send out to you so that you can actually go away and start embedding this into your workplace through the recruitment and retention process. So this is our Stay Well at Work support plan. I'm just going to reshare my screen so I can share it with you in 2 seconds because it's just disappeared. And we actually used to use the Mind's Wellness Action Plan, because obviously I used to work for Mind. And what we found through the use of the Wellness Action Plan was, through feedback from people who were using it, it wasn't always easy and simple to use. So what we wanted to do was just try and improve on the Wellness Action Plan a little bit and make it a little bit more simpler and easier to understand. So the Stay Well at Work support plan can be used by anyone at any point of the employee's cycle within an organisation, all the way through recruitment and retention. Now, it starts off by asking people to think about, what do you like when you're feeling mentally well? What is your normal? And all of our normals will be very different. My mentally well will be very, very different to Mark's. I always use my husband as an example here. So my husband can literally live on 5 hours sleep. He wakes up hungry. He doesn't particularly like to socialize very much. I'm the opposite, need 9 hours sleep, like to socialize. I don't eat till like after lunchtime. So if he all of a sudden started sleeping 9 hours a day, wanting to go out and party all the time, and all of a sudden wasn't very hungry, I'd be a little bit concerned about him, because that's a change from his normal behavior. So what do you like when you're feeling mentally well? What is your normal? And for new members of staff, this is a great way to better understand, how am I going to know when my staff's mentally well? How will I know when they're mentally well? Because these are the things that I'm going to see. Next question is, what do I need to do to keep myself mentally well when I'm at work? Just the same as if you had somebody who was diabetic in your team, they know that there are things that they need to do to stay physically well at work. Make sure they've got their medication, make sure they take time for the snacks. It's really important when it comes to our mental health that we also have access to do the things that we need to do to keep ourselves mentally healthy when we're at work. And again, they will be different for everybody. So for me, it's getting up, making sure I get outside, taking breaks, and that'll be different for everybody. Some people like to work hard all morning and then have a longer break in the daytime. It will be different for everyone, but making sure that those people have access to the strategies that they need to keep themselves mentally well at work. Is there anything that might happen in work that could affect my mental health? So these are things that can actually trigger a relapse. Yeah. Work-related stress, no support from the manager, high levels of demand, not enough resource to do the job, I don't have enough training to do it. So what are the things that could happen at work that could actually re-trigger a relapse for somebody with an underlying mental health problem, or for somebody anyway? What work-related stresses could actually impact our mental health? The next one is, what or who could help me if I experience these things? So if I am experiencing these triggers and I am starting to be impacted, what or who can help us? And it could be people, it could be supportive measures, it could be reasonable adjustments, it could be a manager, it could be HR. You might have mental health advocates in your workplace that I know that if I am struggling with my mental health, I can go and find out how to access my EAP or any additional services that I might need. So what and who can help us? What am I like when I'm becoming unwell? So how will you notice when I'm starting to struggle with my mental health? So you know what you're going to see when I'm mentally well. What symptoms and signs might you begin to recognize that tells you that you need to maybe just sit down and tell us that you're concerned about us and ask if everything's okay? And the last one, what I would like you to do if you are concerned. So if you are worried about us, this is how I want you to respond to us. Yeah, this is how I want you to treat me and say that you're concerned. The last page is things I need to do every day at work to stay well, things I need others to do to support me when I'm at work. It's a very, very simple plan. What do I need to do? What do I need others to do? And when it comes to the workplace and mental health disabilities, there are legal obligations to provide the support for people as well. Anyone have any questions on that Stay Well at Work support plan? No, good stuff.
Emily, Danny's asked, yes, I think you can email that out, can't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I will. I'll send it out. Brilliant. And, you know, it may be that you prefer that one over the Wellness Action Plan, but check them both out, see which one you prefer. It may be that an individual might prefer one or the other. I think the way that they ask the questions are very, very different. So have a look at them, you know, compare them, contrast, see what's going to work best for you or the person who you're offering that support to. So that is a free tool. We will send it out to you. So this just really brings us up to the point where we can just have an open forum for a few minutes to ask any questions if anybody has any, especially for Mark, and potentially, I know Val's already said, we'd love to work together. That's an amazing, that if today was worth doing, it's for you guys to work together. How amazing that Changing Lives are putting themselves forward to look at working together as through their current recruitment process for your service users. Like that, I would love to see that. That would be an amazing outcome from this session. Does anyone else have any questions for Mark about the service, or would be interested in being involved with the service as well through their recruitment processes?
Hello, I'm listening to a webinar on mental health. Mental health is such an issue at work.
Angela.
Was Angela on mute there? Sorry.
Oh no, she was on mic for a bit.
All right. Okay. No, feel free to pop anything in the chat box there as well. I'd literally just have one last slide for you. Just offering a little bit more support for free again. We are currently offering a 30-minute benchmark and consultation for employers to help you to evaluate where you're potentially doing things really well. You know, you may be doing some great things in your workplace, and obviously we want to make sure that they're celebrated. But what we also want to help you to do is to benchmark your culture around mental health on our progression model to help you to identify where some of those barriers and gaps are and how you can actually look at taking action to solve some of those problems. So our culture progression model is based on the social ecological model for prevention and behaviour and culture change. It's an old health and social care model, been around since the 80s. We've actually brought that together with the HSC legislation and management standards for work-related stress and the Thriving at Work standards that were commissioned by the government and provided on a white paper from Paul Farmer from Mind. So we brought all these theories and standards and best practice together into one progression model to help you to benchmark. It's no obligation, you know, we're just here to help. You know, we want to create healthier workplaces for people to help to improve people's lives in the workplace. You know, we are a business, we do work, but we also want to help people as well. So what I'll do in the email is I am going to follow up with the Stay Well at Work support plan. And I'm also going to follow up with a link where you can book your free consultation in directly into my diary there as well. So I will send that out after the session. Mark, I think this is your last slide to go through just to finish us off.
I think it would be wrong to start going through this again, just because of the fact that I am very aware of, we're all busy people. But I think just, have a quick read. This is something that is out there. The NHS isn't normally associated with this kind of work. Certainly in our service delivery area, this is relatively new, and it has purchase and it has traction. We look for very, very progressive, thoughtful, human employers. We really do. And it's so important, as my learned friend had said, you are at the forefront. The fact that you're sitting here listening to Emily and myself means that you are caring and compassionate about what you do and the people that you work with. I would say to you all, and please encourage you, if you do happen to have these conversations and your employee is engaged with our clinical services, encourage them to talk to the likes of Danny, Louise, myself, Mary, and all the other guys who I work with, because it can make the difference between keeping somebody in a good place, a productive place, and them falling away from work, and then us having to manage somebody's, not only their mental health, but also their work-life balance health as well, which is always quite hard to do. So I would just say thank you so much for everybody from my perspective, and thank you, Emily, from me to you. Great session, ma'am, really good.
Do you know what, if it helps somebody to get into work and helps organizations to foster those cultures to improve people's lives, it's definitely worth our time. So I've just popped in the chat box there how I'm going to follow up with next steps. We are here to help, so please do feel free to get in touch with any questions that you have. This will be uploaded onto YouTube, and I'll send you the link out as well, so you have access to it if you need to recap on anything that we've said in the meantime. And the Stay Well at Work support plan will be with you at some point today on an email. So thank you very much for attending, everyone. It's been great to see you. Thank you for the engagement and the questions, and for sharing some of your own insights. And Mark, please thank Paul for allowing us to share his story today. I hope he's doing amazing in his new placement. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Take care. Bye, Danny.
See you later.
I'm gonna stop this.